Chapter 1. Linda Marks Gardner awoke from a dream and felt her husband's erection against her hip. Not nudging it, not demanding, just there. Earlier in her marriage, or maybe more accurately very early, on pre-dawn mornings like this, the bedroom dim and shadowy, Linda would have taken hold of Scott and started something. Those pre-dawn somethings, their bodies still loose and heavy with sleep, would usually turn out pretty good, sometimes better than that. Linda got out of bed. In her dream she'd been frantically erasing words from sheets of pink paper, but the words themselves were all forgotten. Ash went into the bathroom. Scott made a little sound in his sleep, one of those soft grunts that indicate agreement. She had a funny thought, not like her at all. Was he erasing something too? Then she was in the shower, her appointment book opening up in her mind, time blocks dense with her neat writing. There was going to be an overrun on the Skyway account, most of it from the photography group, but not all. Linda tried to figure out where the rest of it came from, letting go of everything but work so completely that she jumped as she caught sight of Scott through the steamy glass, his naked back to her as he stood before the toilet. She called to him, "Can you wake Brandon?" Scott said something she didn't catch because of the shower's noise, almost a roar. When they'd renovated, instead of moving up from West Mill to Old Mill, they'd used nothing but the best, in this case the 10-jet tower from Kohler's Body Spa collection, and when she looked again he wasn't there. The water, hot and pounding, felt so good she could have stayed there all day. Linda turned off the shower at once. She got out, reaching for a towel with one hand, flushing the toilet with the other. Scott always forgot, or didn't bother, or something. Her watch, granite sink top, black granite streaked with midnight blue, the nicest feature in the whole house, told her she was running 2 or 3 minutes late, nothing to be all tense about. She took a deep breath. Bran? 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 Over and over. The word penetrated Brandon's dreams, twisted them out of shape, finally woke him. Brandon. You awake, buddy? It's late. Brandon came awake enough to know he had the covers pulled way up, know that he was totally warm, totally fuzzy, totally unable to get up or maybe even move at all. He got one eye open, not much, just enough to poke at his father through gummy lashes. His father, towel wrapped around his waist, shaving cream on his face, razor dripping in his hand. I'm really not. Forget it, Brandon. You're going to school. I feel like shit. You're going. And watch your language. Brandon didn't say anything. Show a little life. Sit up or something. Don't make me come back here. All right, Brandon said, but the only thing moving was that one eyelid, closing back down, and this room is really getting out of hand. Brandon, almost asleep, barely caught that last bit. The inner fuzziness repaired itself quickly, knitting up the little hole poked through by his father, and then some. A cut glass prism dangled in the window of the bedroom across the hall from Brandon, a window that always caught the first light. As Brandon sank back into deep sleep, the sun blinked up through the bare tree limbs out back, sending a ray through the prism. A tiny rainbow instantly printed itself on the calendar hanging on the opposite wall, and not only that, but precisely on a special square, the one with the birthday cake drawn inside, 11 flame-tipped candles burning on top. That rainbow, quivering slightly on her upcoming birthday, was the first thing Ruby saw when she opened her eyes. She held her breath. This was proof of God's existence. That was her first thought. She'd barely begun to deal with it, and its backpack. That's how some thoughts were. They carried backpacks. That God took a personal interest in her, Aruba Nicole Marks Gardner, before her mind got going with the facts. Sun, east window, prism, a rainbow that had to land somewhere. Coincidence? That was the way Sherlock Holmes would see it, and she respected Sherlock Holmes more than anyone on earth. Didn't love him, Dr. Watson was the lovable one, but respected him still. Coincidence could be tricky. Take that time she'd been eating a bologna sandwich and reading a story about a frog. She must have been 4 when she'd suddenly puked all over the place, including on Brandon beside her in the back seat, Frog and Baloney getting all mixed up in some way. That was how she saw it, and hadn't touched Baloney since. But she could hear Sherlock Holmes, a long car trip and a winding road. One could produce the same result with peanut butter and a penguin. Elementary, my dear Ruby. The rainbow moved on, sliding off her birthday, off the calendar, ballooning along the wall, warping around the corner of her open closet, vanishing in the shadows within. The spinning earth did that, stuck the rainbow in her closet. There would be lots of backpacks to that thought, but Ruby didn't get to them. Some commotion kicked up down the hall, only the sharp notes getting through her door, like when one earphone conks out, "Scott, didn't I ask you to get Brandon up?" Muffled, well, he isn't, as usual, and it's 7:05. "Brandon, get up now." Muffled, then came sounds of movement, and Bran yelled, "Fuck. Don't fucking do that," in that deep new voice of his, ragged at the edges, that vibrated the walls, and Ruby knew that Mom had ripped the covers off him, which always worked. The sounds that followed, Bran getting up, banging around in his room, crossing the hall to the bathroom they shared, turning on the shower, fade das. Ruby took the complete Sherlock Holmes off her bedside table and found her place, the Speckled Band. Just from the title, she knew she was going to like it. Speckled. A word she'd never spoken. She tried it out loud for the first time. Speckled. Speckled. Her stuffed animals watched in silence from their perches on bookshelves. A strange word, with a kind of power, if that made sense, and maybe not power completely for the good. Freckled Wason, the good side, heckled a bit nasty, speckled different in some way, shedded tea no. The garage door opened under her room and her dad's old Triumph rumbled out, sounds that were far, far away. Yes, that was it. What was so special about him? As Ruby read, her room went still, began to lose its physical properties, became less solid. The bachelor lodgings at 221B Baker Street went the other way. Ruby could almost hear the crackle of the fire Mrs. Hudson had had the good sense to light, could almost. Ruby! Ruby! Ruby, for God's sake! What? I called you 6 times. Mom, probably dressed for work, probably standing at the top of the stairs, that impatient look on her face, when Thupan down line between her eyebrows appeared. Are you up? Yeah. Don't forget tennis after school, sweetheart. Just from the change-off tone, Ruby knew the up and down line had smoothed itself out. See you tonight. Mom's voice trailed away as she went down the stairs. Bye, Mom. Maybe not loud enough, because there was no reply. Then Mom was backing out of the garage, lurching just a bit as usual, tires squeaking on the cement floor. The garage door closed, a long whine ending in a thump, and the sound of the Jeep Grand Cherokee, smoother than the Triumph and much less interesting, faded and faded to nothing. Sherlock Holmes deduced from 7 spatters of mud that the terrified young lady in his sitting room had had a rough ride in a dogcart. A car honked on the street, Brandon's ride. The terrified young lady was going mad from fear. Linda was dictating a memo about the Skyway account into her digital organizer when her cell rang. Deborah, her sister-in-law, married to Scott's brother, Tom. Linda always caught her breath for a moment when Deborah called. She was excited about something. Linda could hear it just in the way she said, "Hi." "Hi. Are you at work yet?" "Stuck in traffic." "Me too." Pause, but not a long one. "Did you get Brandon's results?" "What results?" "The SAT. I thought they weren't coming till next week." "That's if you wait for the mail," Deborah said. "There's a number to Callas of 7 this morning. You just need a credit card and patience. It took me 20 minutes to get through." Linda's dashboard clock read 7:32, so you got Sam's results, she said. Sam, Brandon's first cousin, same age 1540. The volume of Deborah's voice went way up, almost an explosion, like some spike caused by a change in atmospheric conditions. Linda held the phone away from her ear. Is that good? Have you forgotten? It's out of 1600, Linda. Sam's in the 99th percentile. Somehow she had forgotten, now it all came back. That's great, Linda said, stop and go on the exit ramp. The homeless guy who worked this spot stared through her window, rattling his Dunkin' Donuts cup. It all came back, including her own score, and she added, wow. Thanks, said Deborah. We kind of expected something good because of his SAT, they track pretty closely, but still. Some kids do get 1600, of course, but we probably won't have him retake it. With his tennis and community, sir, she stopped herself. Anyway, here's the number. Good luck. Linda tried the number. Busy, and it stayed busy until she was about to the parking garage under the building, a cellular dead zone. That was when she got through. Linda pulled over to the side, her foot on the brake, the car in gear. Someone honked. Linda followed the automated menu on the other end, her heart suddenly racing. She needed Brandon's social security number, which she had in her organizer, and a Visa or MasterCard number and expiration date, which she had in her head. It cost $13. There was a pause, a long one, during which she found she'd actually broken into a sweat, and then the digital voice uttered Brandon's numbers, verbal, 510. Math, 580. Linda clicked off and, as soon as she had done so, began to doubt she did right. 510? 580? That would be what, 1090 on the SAT? Impossible. Brandon was a good student, almost always got A's and BS. Those digital voices were sometimes hard to understand, they tended not to emphasize the syllables a normal human being would. Maybe it had been 610 and 680. That would be 1290, the exact score she'd had years before. She didn't think of herself as smarter than Brandon. It must have been 1290. Linda tried the number again. Busy. The clock now read 8 on the button. She was going to be late. No one up there cared about 5 minutes or even 10, but Linda had never been late, not in the 3 years she'd been on the job. She let up on the brake, eased the car back into the long-term check-in lane, hit redial. And connected. As she entered the garage, she went through the social security and credit card routine again, paying another $13, waited for the long pause. While what? While some computer matched the social security number with the credit card number and activated a voice program. How long could it take? She stuck her parking card in the slot, jammed it in, really, and went through the raised gate as the digital voice said, verbal, and lost contact, now in the dead zone. On the elevator, Linda tried once more. The building was 7 stories, her office on 6. Linda got through to the SAT number as she passed 3, repeated the social security and credit card numbers as she was getting out, paying $13 yet again, listened to the long pause as she walked down the corridor. She opened the office door and saw to her surprise that everyone was gathered around the conference table for a meeting. They all turned to look at her. The digital voice spoke once more, 510.580. This time she caught the percentile 2, 75th. Brandon got into Dewey's car. Hey. How's it going? I feel like shit. Tell me about it. Dewey, the first of Brandon's friends to get his license, had a joint going which sometimes happened on the ride home but never in the morning. He passed it to Brandon. Brandon didn't want to go to school, fucked up, didn't want to go to school at all, but shit. He didn't take it any further than that, just hit off the joint, passed it back. Could use some gas money, Dewey said. Brandon handed Dewey 3 ones. Am I driving a lawnmower and I don't know it? Brandon handed over 2 more, noticing that the fuel gauge read full, but so what? Dewey pulled away from the curb, squealing the tires just a bit. He switched on a CD, some rap about "fuck you, good as new, all wedo, then it's through" that Brandon hadn't heard before. "Not too bad, school sucks," Dewey said. "Yeah. I'm thinking about dropping out." "You mean before senior year?" "I mean like now." "But what about baseball?" Dewey had been captain of the freshman team and had started a few games for the varsity last spring. "I'm not going to be eligible anyway," Dewey said. "I'm flunking 2 courses. Still time to get them up." Dewey took a big hit off the joint, breathed out slow. "Right," he said, "fuck you, good as new, all we do, then it's through, not too bad." "It was great. Who's this?" "You don't know who this is?" "Unca Death." At that moment, Brandon remembered he had an English test 3rd period, counting for 20% of the term grade. Macbeth. Hadn't studied for it, had fallen asleep after the first few lines, some weird shit with witches that was meant to be symbolic or ironic or some other term he dave to define, probably getting points taken off even though he knew damned well what they meant. "Got an idea," Dewey said. "Let's go to the city." "What city?" "New York, for fuck's sake. I know this bar in the village where they don't T-card anybody. Almost 2 hours away." Brandon had been to New York maybe a dozen times, but always with his family. "I've only got, like, $10 on me." "It's cool. I've got a credit card." "You do?" "On my mom's account. For emergencies." Dewey started to laugh. Then Brandon was laughing too. Emergencies, he got it. They drove right past the school. Buses were pulling in and the student lot was filling up. Brandon saw people he knew. Dewey beeped the horn. Brandon thought, "Oh shit," as they went by. Dewey passed him the joint. "All yours," he said, ramping up the volume on Unca Death. The house was quiet. Ruby loved having it to herself. The terrified lady told Holmes, "You may advise me how to walk amid the dangers which encompass me." Ruby checked the time, stuck in a bookmark, the one with Dilbert's boss. It had finally hit her that the boss's pointy hair was meant to make you think of the devil. She was so slow sometimes, and got up. Out the window, she saw a cardinal at the feeder, poking its red head inside. It suddenly turned toward her window, then rose and shot off into the town forest behind the house. Ruby brushed her teeth with the Sonicare toothbrush until the inside of her mouth tingled, then smiled into the mirror. Not a real smile with her eyes joining in, this was just an examination of teeth. Dr. Gottlieb said she was going to need braces. How crooked were her teeth anyway? She studied them from several angles. Some days they looked pretty straight. Today she saw a complete jumble. Brandon hadn't flushed the toilet, also hadn't aimed very well. Careful where she put her feet, Ruby flushed it for him and got in the shower. She chose the Aussie Extra Gentle shampoo with the kangaroo on the front because she liked the combination of shampoo and kangaroo. Helen Curtis Salon Selectives conditioner because it said completely drenched, whatever that meant, and FA body wash because it smelled like kiwi. Clean, dry, smelling great, she wrapped her hair in a towel and got dressed. Khakis from the Gap, a long-sleeved t-shirt with a silver star on the front, black clogs with thick soles to make her taller, and went down to the kitchen. Zippy awoke at once, sprang up from under the table, bounded toward her, tail wagging down. Zippy. But of course he wouldn't go down, did just the opposite, raising himself higher, resting his front paws on her shoulders. Down. He poked his muzzle in her face, gave her a big wet lick on the nose. Up, she said, just as an experiment. Zippy dropped to all fours at once, snagging her t-shirt as he did. 2 of the little arms of the silver star now hung loose. Zippy. Bad boy. He wagged his tail. His water bowl was empty. Ruby filled it. He ignored the bowl, but as soon as her back was turned she heard him slurping noisily. Ruby made her breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, and orange juice. No milk, she only drank milk when forced. Next to her bedroom, the kitchen was her favorite room in the house. The copper pots on the wall, the fruit bowl, now empty but sometimes full of all kinds of fruit, the wooden spoons, the spice rack, the big fridge humming in the corner. She needed both hands to open the door. The walls are lovely light yellow, perfect for the eating of eggs. Ruby's seat at the table was in the actual sticking out part of the breakfast nook, with windows on 3 sides. She ate her yellow eggs in a pool of yellow sunlight, leafing through the All-American Girl's Book of Braiding, trying to think of the right name for those star arms, totally content. Maybe her teeth weren't so great, but her hair, that was another story. Thick, glossy brown, full of all kinds of tints, it had a personality of its own. Ruby chose the Thumbelina braid because the look reminded her of Dilbert's boss. She made 2 high pigtails, divided each into 3 strands, braided the strands, coiled them into buns, stuck them in place with bobber pins. How do I look, Zippy? He poked his head over the tabletop and snatched her last piece of toast, the one with the butter melted in perfectly. Zippy. He growled at her. She gave him the cold look. Zippy made himself smaller and slunk away. Like the coward he was, Ruby put on her blue jacket with the yellow trim and walked him out back and into the town forest, taking the shortcut to the pond. The banks off pond were muddy. She let him off the leash. Run, Zippy. Make spatters. He lifted his leg and peed on a tree. Were dog spatters different from horse spatters, or was the important difference the one between a dog cart and a horse cart, which would probably stand higher? Run, Zippy. He didn't want to run. She tossed him a stick, which he gazed at. She tossed another one into the pond. It disappeared without a splash, which was kind of strange. Go get it, Zippy. But he wouldn't. She didn't blame him. The water, a blue so pale it was almost white, looked cold. She took him home. He lifted his leg at least a dozen times. Pooh, Zippy, pooh. He finally did, maybe stepping in it just a little. Ruby loaded the dishwasher, her own dishes and the ones already in the sink, slung on her backpack and left by the front door, making sure it was locked. The school bus pulled up. She got on. Hi, beautiful, said the driver. Hi, Mr. V. There was only one seat left, beside Winston. He was picking his nose. Don't eat it, Winston, she said, but he did. The bus rolled away. All of a sudden and for no reason, she remembered her book of Bible stories, sent by Graham to make up for the fact that Mom and Dad didn't go to church. Specifically, she remembered the story of Lot's wife, who wasn't supposed to look back. She had the strong feeling that it was very important not to look back right now. But she couldn't stop herself. The urge grew and grew in the muscles of her neck. Ruby looked back and nothing happened, of course. She didn't turn into a pillar of salt, and the house wasn't going up in flames. It stayed just the way it always was, not the biggest or fanciest house on the block, but square and solid, white with black shutters, the only color the red brick chimney, maybe a little too, what was the word? Imposing, too imposing for the rest of the house. She'd overheard her Aunt Deborah say that the Thanksgiving before last, Winston tore a Snickers in 2. Want some, he said. Ruby gave him a close look to see if this was some kind of joke. But no, he'd made no connection between the nose-picking and his dirty fingernail son the candy bar. He was just sharing. Maybe Amanda wants some, Ruby said. Amanda leaned over, with her goddamn pierced ears. Ruby had to wait another year. Maybe Amanda wants some what? Amanda said, and what was that? She was wearing lipstick. Snickers, Ruby said, all of a sudden feeling the power of those devilish horns on her head. You like Snickers, don't you? Oh, my favorite, said Amanda. Winston handed her the thing. Ruby watched till she'd popped it in her mouth. Said Amanda. Chapter 2. Linda's meeting ran until 9:30. 1 minute later, she was in her office, a cubicle. Really, they all worked in cubicles as part of new team concept. Calling Scott, there's been some disturbing news, she said, the Skyway account. That too. I got Brandon SAT results. So did I. Tom told you about the credit card thing. What a racket, Scott said. He laughed. And we paid double. Linda didn't inform him they'd paid 4 times now to hear the news. I guess they both did pretty well, Scott said. What's disturbing? I'm not following you, Linda said. Had there been some sort of computerized mix-up, had Scott heard the real score, much higher, Brandon and Sam, Scott said. Tom said Sam did okay, and Brandon's in the 75th percentile, right? Nothing wrong with that. Where to begin? Linda found herself squeezing the phone in frustration. She had a thought, a series of thoughts. Not nice. Had Scott ever talked about his own SAT results? Had she ever asked? If not, why not? First of all, she said, are you telling me that Tom didn't mention Sam's score? Just said he did all right. Sam got 1540. Almost perfect, Scott. He's in the 99th percentile. Silenced 1090 is terrible, Linda said. The worst thing we can do now is fool ourselves about that. I don't get it, Scott said. Brandon's always been a good student. What's his GPA? It was 3.4 but he slipped to 3.3, 3.29, actually, last term. 3.3's not bad, A's and B's, right? Linda tried to relax her grip on the phone. A's and B's at West Mill Higher and A's and B's at Andover. What's that supposed to mean? Sam was at Andover. It means that colleges know the difference, and a 1090 SAT and a 3.3 from West Mill High tells the Ivies not to even look at him. It's probably programmed in their computers. There's always Amherst or someplace like that, Scott said of Amherst. Are you dreaming? Forget Amherst. You can forget Trinity for God's sake. Forget Trinity. Forget NYU, forget BC, forget BU, even. Don't you get it? The SAT ranks every kid in the nation. 75th percentile means there are hundreds of thousands ahead of him, maybe millions. The good schools can fill their classes without going anywhere near Brandon. We screwed up. How? In our usual way, by not seeing this coming. What could we have done? Made him retake the SAT for starters. The SAT? Come on, Scott. Don't you remember? He felt sick, supposedly, and left after 5 minutes. I don't see, so we never got a score, and the SAT tracks the SAT. We've missed a whole year. Of what? Preparation, Linda said. Maybe at boarding school. But we discussed that. We didn't want him to go away. And he didn't want to go away. And don't we believe in public education? Don't we believe in Brandon first? And you left out not being able to afford it. Pause. So what are we going to do? I don't know. Get him right into an SAT prep course, that's one thing. Maybe he just had a bad day. I hope to God that's it, but we can't take the chance. We should probably have his IQ tested just to see what we have the right to expect. There was a long silence. She could feel his resistance, not thought out something deep in his character, genetic. Tom's DNA was different. That thought just popped up, nothing she could do. We're talking about Brandon's future, Linda said. What his life's going to be when he's on his own, when he's our age. More silence. Then Scott said, Sam's in the 99th percentile. Correct. Harvard, Brown, Williams, they're going to be beating down his door. At that moment, Tom came into Scott's office, raised his eyebrows, pointed to his watch. Gotta go. Scott said there were lots of things Ruby didn't like about school, but Mad Minute was the worst. All right, said Ms. Freeling, welcoming them back from recess. Time for Mad Minute. Like it was a treat, going to the circus or the beach. Ms. Freeling passed out the papers, everybody getting a sheet covered with rows of multiplication problems. Wait for it, said Ms. Freeling, taking out her stupid stopwatch. 3, 2, 1, go. Ruby gazed down at the sheet. First question, 37 times 92. Christ on a crutch. 7 times 2 is, she liked that expression, Christ on a crutch, although she really didn't get what it meant. 14, write the 4 and carry 1. 7 times 9 is 56. This was one off the tricky ones. 63. Got it. Plus 1 makes 4. Skip a space point. 3 times 2 is. There was also shit on a stick. She liked that too. She became aware of her hand moving along the rows of numbers, attacking the problems on its own. 8 times 7. There's your 56. Write down the 6, carry the dot. Crutch was a bit like cross, and Christ had died on a cross. Another thing Ruby didn't like was turning the pages of one of the art books in the living room and suddenly coming across a painting of the crucifixion. She'd be willing to bet that crutch meant cross, or had been cross at one time, or something like that. And that crown of thorns. She felt prickling all around her head. Her hand plowed on. 6 times 9 makes 50, time's up, class. Pencils down. 6. Write 6, carry the 5, everybody. Pencils down this instant. Not 6. 4. 54. Why the hell, everybody includes Ruby. Ruby laid down her pencil, counted the problems she'd done. 8. Now exchange papers with your neighbor for grading. Ruby exchanged Mad Minute papers with Amanda, so that Amanda had answered every single one. Amanda gave her a friendly smile. Her teeth were huge and white, of course. God, I'm perfect. The answer to number 1 is, and the guy who actually put the crown of thorns on Christ's head, how come he didn't get thorns stuck in his own hand? If those thorns were anything like the briars in the town forest. Had he worn gloves? It wasn't a kind of climate for gloves, they were in the desert, right, but didn't some of those gladiator types wear? Ruby glanced up, so that Miss Freeling was eyeing her for some reason. Are all of us, each and every, ready for number 2? Ruby looked down at Amanda's answer to number 1, 37 times 92. What had Miss Freeling just said? Ruby couldn't bring the number back, but Amanda's answer struck her as wrong in some way. Certainly wasn't what she remembered getting herself. She marked an X beside it and waited for the answer to number 2. All ears. What's it gonna be, guys? There were like 50 beers on tap, literally. This was the coolest place Brandon had ever been in. The long bar, some kind of dull metal, was cool. The music was cool. The people sitting around or shooting pool were cool. The bartender was cool. The bartender's tattoo, a perfect likeness of herself right on the side of her face, was cool. Brandon pointed to the nearest tap, the one with a picture of a bear. The bartender poured him a glass. She had muscular bare arms, the coolest arms she'd ever seen on a woman. The beer was dark brown, unlike any beer Heck knew. He took a sip. It was horrible. You like that porter shit, said Dewey. The bartender was pouring him something that looked more like beer. This one's pretty good, Brandon said, taking another sip. The taste didn't get any better. $5, said the bartender. I'll get this round, said Brandon, handing over his $10 bill. Then it's $9.50 altogether. The bartender rang it up, placed 2 quarters on the dull metal bar. Brandon copied a gesture he'd seen in a movie, meaning it was all hers. Thanks, said the bartender. Brandon ordered the same on the next round. Dewey took out their emergency credit card and the bartender opened a tab. just to show how into Porter he was, but the round after that he switched to what Dewey was having. It wasn't that big an emergency. He kept that joke, if it was a joke, to himself, not sure how it would come across. Dewey was gazing around the room. He smiled at a big girl with a huge head of blonde hair, and the girl smiled back. When Dewey wasn't looking, Brandon tried smiling at her too. He got a smile back, maybe even friendlier. "Think I'll move down here," said Dewey. "Get a job as one of those bicycle messengers. They make $300 a day." "They do?" "At least." Dewey ordered another round, plus cigars. They smoked and drank. Interesting-looking people went by on the street outside, not the kinned-off people you saw in West Mill or even Hartford. Take that tow truck driver. He had a red bandana on his head and an eye patch, just like a pirate. Brandon got up to go to the bathroom. "Hey!" The porter hit him at that moment, and he felt a little unsteady. Nothing noticeable, nothing uncool, and he recovered right away, although maybe not completely because he went into the wrong bathroom. The big blonde girl was inside. On the other hand, she was pissing at the urinal, her leather skirt hiked up, and Brandon backed outside, waited in the hallway by the pay phone. On that street, a woman carrying a bass drum on her head went by, and then the tow truck guy came back the other way, a car hooked up behind. Brandon watched the woman till she was out of sight to make sure that was what she was. He barely noticed the car. They sat in Tom's office, the office that had been the old man's, Tom behind the desk, Scott on the couch that hadn't been there in the old man's stay, so Brandon did well too. Tom said, "Not bad." "Glad to hear it. He's such a funny kid." Funny. That crooked smile of his. Wouldn't it be something if they ended up at the same college somewhere? Like us. Like us. At UConn. True that they'd both gone to UConn, but Scott's arrival as a freshman coincided with Tom's transfer to Yale for his last 2 years. Think of the tailgate parties. And can't you imagine Mom's reaction, say they were both at Princeton or someplace? Scott didn't reply. Maybe Tom thought he was imagining Mom's reaction. "There's kind of a situation," Scott said. Tom gave him a look that went way back, that Scott couldn't put into words, that said a lot anyway. Money. If you want to put it that way. You know Mickey Goodukers? Bald lefty who foot faults all the time? A real sleazeball. He gets good information. What kind of information? On the market. He's a broker now? I thought he was a claims adjuster or something. He was. Then a broker. At Denman, how? He's still a broker, just not with them anymore. Can from Denman, how? What line do you have to cross for that? He was the one gave me the Stentec tip. You made out all right off that, as I recall. Tom nodded. But I checked into it pretty carefully before I bought. The only stock market investment Tom had ever made, outside of indexed mutual funds, sure. The thing is, I ran into him picking up Ruby from tennis a while back and he gave me another tip. Same kind of deal, a biotech with a new product coming out of testing. This one's called Symptomatica. How's her game? Whose game? Tom could be confusing sometimes. Ruby's. Okay, I guess. She likes it. Tennis? Sure. Didn't she? She'd been taking lessons for years. Ruby was pretty quick but kind of small, hard to tell whether she'd develop into aerial player. But it was important to demonstrate a long-term commitment to a sport, preferably 2 sports, even if you weren't athletic scholarship material. Parents around the court were talking about that just the other day. Maybe Brandon would move up the ladder this year, not necessarily to Sam's level. Sam was already playing number 3 at Andover, but at least getting to where some Division III coach might put in a word for him at the admissions department. 99th fucking percentile. A cute kid, Tom said. Who? Ruby. Yeah. The thing is, this Symptomatica deal is the reverse of the last one. Their hot product isn't going to work. So the place to go short. Selling short? You're getting involved in shit like that. Never, Scott said, and it was almost true. But in this case there's no risk. It's like seeing into the future. Tom glanced at the portrait on the wall, the old man, a year or two after got sick. To everyone else on the planet, that glance could have meant anything or nothing, but Scott got the message. Seeing the future, was that any way for an insurance man to talk? The foundation of their business was the uncertainty of the future. How do you know this product or whatever it is will fail? Tom said Audiobook's met one of their scientists on a cruise. Guy's teaching at MIT. No. He cashed out when he realized the thing was doomed. They're still scrambling around to save it, but there's no way. They made some huge mistake right off the bat. What mistake? Something about junk DNA. Audiobook drew the whole thing out on a napkin for me and I understood it at the time, but it's all very technical and doesn't matter in the end. What matters is the day those test results come in, the stock will tank. What's it trading at? Closed at 12 and change yesterday. It's going down to zero, Tom. I was thinking of 20,000 shares, 10 each. We'd clear almost $250,000. What's Audiobook's angle? Full rate commission, if that's an angle. Tom rocked back and forth in the chair, just like the old man used to do. Scott grew aware of a strange triangle in the room. Portrait, Tom, himself. The truth was neither of them looked much like the old man. They resembled their mother, resembled each other even more, Scott being a little bigger, Tom a little darker, his features a little more prominent. Their voices were almost identical. Everyone mentioned that. Count me out, Tom said. You're walking away from $250,000, just like that. I'm not stopping you. Scott took a deep breath. His brokerage wants some collateral on a deal like this. Move your account over there. Not enough. But what about all that Stentec stock? Paid for the renovations. You spent $80,000 on those renovations. We got our money's worth, Scott said. He didn't mention that some of $80,000 had gone into another stock that hadn't worked out as well. He also said nothing about his house being just as nice as Tom's, maybe nicer. Put it on the same street up in Old Mill, it would be worth a lot more than Tom's. Leave it at that. You've got a great house, Tom said. I wasn't saying that. Like he'd been listening inside, Scott shrugged. I can't use the retirement account, there's some SE's thing. And putting up the house would require Linda's signature. She doesn't know about this. You know how she is. Tom didn't answer that. Just stop rocking. That leaves the business, Scott said. The business. My share. As collateral. Tom was rocking again. HW, Gardner Insurance, 35% Tom, 25% him, 40% the estate, meaning their mom, now in Arizona. I don't even know if it's possible, Tom said. At a minimum, it would require my signature and mom's on some sort of document. I don't even know what. Scott said, I'll cover any legal fees, goes without saying. Tom said, can't you just walk away from this one? They gazed at each other. This had always been hard for Scott, so much like gazing at himself in the mirror, but a strange self, pained and not fully cooperative. It had nothing to do with the 35-25 split. That was fair. Tom had started with the old man right out of college, while Scott had kicked around for 10 or 12 years, first in Boston, then in Hartford, climbing the corporate ladder at Prudential, then Travelers, finally Allstate. Don't you ever dream of independence, Tom? Tom blinked. Independence. Financial independence. Just being free to. I don't know. We're doing pretty good here, Scott, both of us. The wives, the kids, everybody. You are, Scott thought. You're doing good. But he didn't say it. What about Mom? Tom said she'll do whatever you say, you know that. Tom looked away. I'll think about it, he said. That's the best I can do. Think fast, for once, Scott thought. The clock is ticking. He meant that just in the narrow sense of the symptomatica deal, but right away he knew it was bigger than that. Why couldn't Tom hear that goddamn ticking? Chapter 3. Kyla Guduka started the deciding point by serving to Ruby's backhand. Every lesson ended with a round robin, the finalists playing a 4-no-ad game set, the winner, almost always Kyla, getting a prize like grip tape, Gatorade, or a can of balls from Eric, the pro at their indoor club. Ruby got her racket back, stepped into the ball, low to high, low to hig, as Eric repeated over and over until she wanted to scream, and hit a nice backhand cross-court. Kyla hit it back, one of those deep shots of hers that was mostly a lob, not hit hard, just getting it back. Ruby hit another backhand cross-court, maybe even better than the one before. Kyla lobbed it back. Ruby tried hitting the next one to Kyla's forehand. Kyla lobbed it back. Ruby went to Kyla's forehand a couple more times. Lob, lob. Then the backhand again. Lob. 3 more times. Lob, lob, lob. Thrice, was that a word? A nice one, maybe even a great one. Ruby had a word list where she ranked all. She hit the next shot into the net. She must have, because there it was, bouncy bouncy, on her side. Game, set, match. They went to the net, shook hands. Nice game. Nice game. Eric came over with a bottle of Gatorade, the blue kind that Ruby liked best. Here you go, champ, he said, handing it to Kyla, but with his Swiss accent or whatever. It sounded just like chump, so Ruby started feeling better almost right away. See everyone here next Monday, Eric said. Everyone will be here, said Ruby very quietly. What was that, Ruby? Maybe not quietly enough. She gave him a winning smile. Thanks for the lesson. Oh. You are most welcome. Welcome, welcome, everyone's welcome. Ruby zipped her racket into its cover. For men with knee braces, arm braces, hairy arms, loud voices came onto the court. Get the court good and warm for us, kids, said one of them. Don't burn your feet, Ruby said. Kyla laughed. She had a funny little laugh that Ruby liked. They went into the lobby. Ruby drank from the fountain, hardly getting up on her tiptoes at all. Someone had left gum in there. Your mom called, Ruby, said the lady at the desk. She's going to be a little late. Ruby sat on a bench by the vending machine, checked in her backpack. Had she remembered the complete Sherlock Holmes? No. Did she have any money left over from lunch, just 65 cents for M&Ms? No. She gazed at the M&Ms row through the glass of the vending machine, noticed that the lead pack was half hanging over the edge. Then, without quite being aware of it, she was on her feet, facing the machine. Maybe just a little nudge, completely accidental, like so, Ruby. She whipped around. Kyla, by the front door. My dad says we can give you a ride home. Ruby heard a thud behind her, but soft.mr. Gudukas had a nice car, all soft leather in the back where Ruby and Kyla Saturday. Alone in front, he glanced at Ruby in the mirror. Very nice, said Mr. Gudukas, looking at the house. He twisted around and smiled at her, but all she really saw was his mustache, so weird a mustache was saying something. Whatever it was, Ruby didn't want to hear. How long you been living here? He said. Since before I was born, Ruby said, opening the door. That conservation land out back. Yeah, said Ruby, getting out. It was cold. How many bedrooms? 4, Ruby said. Mom and Dad's, Brandon's, hers, the empty one at the end of the hall and up those little stairs. She didn't like being reminded of that empty one. Thanks for the drive. Anytime, honey, said Mr. Goodookers. The sky was already that dark blue and purple color that Ruby didn't like, the color of the bottom of the deep cold sea. The house was dark too. She wished she'd turned some lights on in the morning, and had a funny thought as she unlocked the door, Mrs. Locke comes home. Could make a good caption for one of those Far Side cartoons that were so funny, although what sort of picture would? Zippy bolted out the moment she opened the door, streaked right by her, made a beeline for the Strombolis house across the street. His feet on their driveway, or his motion or something, triggered all their outdoor lights which flashed on like Christmas. Zippy couldn't have been more visible, darting up to their front door, a huge gleaming thing, big enough for a castle, the gleams clear from all the way across the street, darting up Tot Hat front door, lifting his leg and peeing all over it. Ruby could see the yellow stain flowing slowly down, the lights were that good. Zippy couldn't have done a worse thing. The Strombolis hated him, hated the whole family because of him. Lights were going on all over their goddamn house. Ruby had read about people freezing in a crisis, completely paralyzed. She hadn't believed it till now that she appeared to be one of them, even incapable of that one simple step into the house, banging the door closed, safety. And now came Zippy, pelting back across the street, all four paws in the air at once, his ears going every which way. As he hit the front lawn, the Strombolis' huge gleaming door started to open. Ruby couldn't budge. Zippy, eyes wide, bowled smack into her, knocking her clear into the front hall. Ruby kicked the door closed as she fell, backpack and tennis racket flying, M&Ms clicking across the tile floor. Ruby lay in darkness, Zippy panting beside her. She was panting too. She thought of telling him what a bad dog he was, but why? He was hopeless, and at the same time he could be worse, like the hound of the Baskervilles, she told him. That would be worse. But he wasn't listening, was already going after the M&Ms. She could hear them skittering away from him. Ruby got up, started switching on lights. Like idea bulbs in a cartoon, and the moment she had that thought it hit her that tennis and math were a lot alike, the Mad Minute and those stupid for no ad game sets being almost identical. The backpack thought of that was all. The phone rang. It made her jump, even cry out a little, although she might have imagined that part. Were the Strombolis nuts? Did they really believe she'd answer? The machine picked up. Ruby heard angry Stromboli breathing, then a hang-up. It rang again 2 seconds later. A knock it off, Strombolis, Ruby said. The machine took the call again. No angry breathing this time. Anybody home? Said Brandon. Ruby picked up. Hey, she said. Or maybe, hey. She was glad to hear his voice. Who's home? Me. Who else? And Zippy. You know what forget about fucking a Zippy. That little explosion took Ruby by surprise. She was silent. Ruby, he said, his voice not so harsh. You still there? Yeah. Tell Mom and Dad I'll be a little late. How late? Jesus, they're gonna ask. Okay, not too late. I'm over at Dewey's. Ruby heard rap in the background. It sounded like Uncle Death, maybe that one about fuck you all we do. Working on an essay, Brandon added. What's it about? What's that to you? He hung up without saying goodbye. She was just interested, that was all. Big brother shit, nothing to think twice about, but Ruby looked immediately in the obvious place anyway, a framed color photograph hanging over the hall table. There was the family at the beach in Jamaica a few years before, Brandon not much older than Ruby now. Everyone was smiling except Ruby, who was laughing her head off. Brandon stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. Ruby went into the kitchen. Through the sticking-out window she could see a crescent moon just above the dark mass of the forest. The air was clear, or her eyesight especially keen tonight, because the 2 points of the crescent looked sharp. She switched on the lights and the outside went away. Points, that was what those arms on a star were called. Sometimes she was so slow. Zippy's water bowl was empty again. She filled it. "How about hot dogs?" she said. Hot dogs sounded good. She took a package from the freezer. Hot dogs tasted better on the grill, and Ruby knew how to work it, turning on the gas, then pressing the button that made the spark, but she didn't feel like going out on the deck. Not because of the darkness, nothing like that, don't think that for a moment. Too cold for grilling, nothing more. Ruby boiled 2 hot dogs, found they were out of buns, stuck them inside folded slices of bread, sat down at the table with everything she needed: mustard, relish, Sprite, the complete Sherlock Holmes. The sitting room at 221B Baker Street in early April 1883 materialized, grew more and more solid. "I am a dangerous man to fall foul of," said Dr. Roylott, the terrified woman's stepfather. Then he seized Holmes's poker and bent it into a curve with his huge brown hands. The brown was because of all those years in India, the same reason the cheetah and the baboon were running around his crumbling manor. Whoa, no cheetahs and baboons in India, Africa, my dear Watson, as Ruby knew from the Discovery Channel. So was this a clue? She'd come back to that later. What was bothering her? What? She thought as she took a big-relishy bite of hot dog, had more to do with the poker. Dr. Roylott bent that poker to show how dangerous he was. But Ruby ran her eye back up the page. There, only a few paragraphs above, Dr. Roylott stepped forward, shaking his hunting crop. No mention in between of him putting the hunting crop down, or sticking it in his teeth, or asking Watson to hold it for ASEC.SO. Was she supposed to think that he'd twisted the poker with his huge brown hands while holding the hunting crop at the same time? Or could it be that this was some kind of mistake, a mistake by the guy clever enough to think up Sherlock Holmes, the cleverest detective in the world? Or Ruby? Ruby looked up. There was Mom, in the kitchen. "Didn't you hear me come in?" Mom was still in her coat, that beautiful grey one with the black fur collar, but the side door to the garage was already closed. "Hi, Mom. What have you done to your hair?" "Thumbelina," Ruby said. "You like it?" "It's different," Mom said. Mom's own hair was as black as that collar and glossy too. Mom had gorgeous hair, no doubt about that. "Kyla's father drove you home?" "Yeah." "You remember to thank him?" "Yeah." "How was your day?" "Good." "Got much homework?" "A little," Ruby said, although that was more an impression than hard fact. "I've brought some dinner," Mom said, lifting a bag from the Blue Dragon with a grunt, as though she found it heavy, and setting it on the butcher block. Ruby smelled oyster sauce, which meant that duck thing that no one ever ate. Mom's eyes had crescents under them that reminded Ruby of the moon, except they were dark. "Or have you eaten already?" "Just a snack," Ruby said, although she was about full. Or Mom glanced up at the clock. 7:55, got busy with the cartons, plates, forks, spoons. "Why don't you take your coat off, Mom?" Her mother looked at her in a funny way. For a second Ruby thought she was going to come over and give her a hug, which would have been nice. Not that Ruby didn't get hugs, just that now would have been nice. Instead, Mom took a step toward the mudroom, where the coat pegs were. Then she turned, came right over to Ruby, almost shy, Ruby thought, which was crazy, and kissed her on the top of her head. "You've got the best hair in the world," Mom said. "Not as nice as yours. 1,000 times nicer." Mom went into the mudroom. Ruby knew hair couldn't feel anything, but that kiss lingered in her hair anyway. Mom came back, coat off. "Brandon's not home." She'd have seen that his jacket, the varsity jacket with West Mill tennis on the back, wasn't there. "He's at Dewey's," Ruby said. The up and down line appeared between Mom's eyes. Working on an essay. At Dewey's. Ruby nodded. Did he say when he'll be home? Not too late. Ruby heard Mom taking a deep breath. Then the garage door was whining open, the Triumph rumbling in, and Dad came in through the side door. "Hi, everybody," he said. He went to the butcher block, grabbed a ball of orange chicken right from the carton. "Where's Brandon?" "At Dewey's, evidently," said Mom. "Working on an essay." Dad glanced up, a second orange chicken ball in his hand. "Where's Dewey going to college?" "That's an interesting question," Mom said. Ruby got ready for an interesting answer, but that wasn't what came next. "How so?" Dad said. All of a sudden they were on the edge of fighting about something. Dewey? Were they going to fight about Dewey's college plans? Ruby liked Dewey. He had the funniest bumper sticker she'd ever seen, but you had to get real close to read it. "Fuck you, you fucking fuck." Driving around with that on the back of his car. She almost started laughing right there at the table. "Just that we should have been taking a little more notice of the college plans of Brandon's peer group," Mom said. Mom and Dad exchanged a look that Ruby didn't get. "Where's Bran going to college?" she said, reaching for a fortune cookie. "There's another good question," Mom said. Mom and Dad were still looking at each other, communicating something. Dad broke off whatever it was first, turned to Ruby and said, "How was your day, sweetheart?" "Great," said Ruby, removing the crinkly wrapper from the fortune cookie. "Did you see that girl? What's her name? Mickey Goudoukas' daughter. Kyla. We played in the round robin. Whip her butt." "Nope." Dad came over, sat down at the table. "How do you like tennis, anyway?" he said. "How do I like it?" "Yeah. As a game, if you see what I'm getting at." He had a strange look on his face, like her opinion mattered to him. He was a great dad. She knew exactly what he was getting at and told him the complete truth. "It's just like math." "What did that mean?" Scott asked after Ruby went upstairs to do her homework. "No idea," said Linda. "But she's not doing well at math. I don't think she even knows her times tables." "Oh, boy," Scott said, a commonplace remark, but it set her thinking, and him too. Linda could see it in his eyes, an inward look combined with a hint of moisture, as though he'd blinked too much. 5th grade, where Ruby was now, had been Adam's last year of school. Along with everything else, he'd been captain of the math team. "It's not too early to start worrying about her," Linda said. "Can you imagine how competitive it's going to be when she starts applying to college?" Scott undid the top button on his pants. Did he have to do that every night, and ate the rest of Ruby's egg roll? Then he got up, went to the liquor cabinet, poured himself a scotch. "I hope you're taking this seriously." "Of course I am." "Something to drink?" "We're going to have to be united on this." "On what, exactly?" "Making Brandon look like the best candidate we can. It's not just their academics." Linda started making notes on a blue dragon paper napkin. "The academics boil down to 3 things: GPA, course difficulty, SAT, then there's community service, of which he has none, and sports." "Is he any good at tennis?" "We might as well face this right now. He was better at soccer, if you want my true opinion." "Then why did you let him drop it?" "I let him drop it." "You're the one he talked to." "You mean that scene in the car after the Old Mill game?" "He was going to do it no matter what I said." "The coach is an asshole, he's right about that. Everybody has to learn how to get along with assholes." Scott gazed into his glass. Was he thinking about what she'd just said? The glass was empty. He got up to pour another. Soccer was in the past. "Let's get back to tennis," Linda said. "Is he even good enough to play D3? Back when I played college." "Yeah. Now, I don't know. It's tougher." Who would know? Eric, Scott said. I'll ask him. Eric coached the West Mill varsity. Thank you, Linda said, writing Eric on the napkin, under the dragon stale. Beside that she wrote, special talents. Zip. At least Ruby had her saxophone. She made a mental note to get a progress report from the band teacher. All this would have to go on the computer. Linda started organizing future files in her head, then Scott surprised her. He opened his briefcase, took out 2 cardboard boxes, the size and shape of library card index drawers. Each was marked SAT Survival Kit. Pick these up on the way home, he said, sliding them across the table. Linda opened the boxes. They were packed tight with SAT flashcards, 1 box verbal, 1 box math. Linda opened the math box, plucked a card at random. A line has x-intercept at x plus 3 and y-intercept at y equals 1, 4. Find the slope off the line. A, 112b, 112c, 12d, 12e, none of the above. Oh, Scott, she said, this is going to be all right, isn't it? She leaned down and kissed him, mostly on the side of the face, a little overlap on the ear. He was going to take this seriously. They were going to topple together, get Brandon into somewhere really good. Sure, he said. Stop worrying. They heard the front door open. Chapter 4. Hey, said Brandon, coming into the kitchen. Hello, Brandon, said Linda. How's it going? Said Scott. Same old, said Brandon, flipping open the carton of duck with oyster sauce, moving on to the orange chicken instead. Feeling all right, said Linda. You look a little flushed. Feel great, said Brandon, opening the fridge, drinking orange juice from the carton. Or a glass, please, said Linda. Oops, said Brandon, and gulped some more. How's Dewey these days? Said Scott. Decent, said Brandon. What are his college plans? Said Linda. Brandon shrugged. Did he take the SAT? Said Linda. I guess. Any idea how he did? Nope. You don't discuss this kind of thing with your friends. What kind of thing? The SAT, college, said Scott. The future, said Linda. They're my friends, Brandon said. Why would we talk about that? What do you talk about? Linda said. Brandon knew his mother was a pretty smart woman, but had he ever heard a stupider question than that? You know, he said. Stuff. There was a silence. Brandon dug a fork into the Mongolian beef. It was good. Fucking blue dragon, coming through again. He was so hungry could have just sat down and eaten everything on the table. On the other hand, the smart move was maybe to get up to his room, disappear. He was about to take the first step. Linda said, how did the essay go? Essay? The room was unsteady for a moment. Brandon caught his reflection in the window behind Ruby's seat. He looked totally bombed. Why? He'd had only 8 or 10 beers the whole day. Must have been those porters to start. Had there been another one later on, that you worked on at Dewey's? Oh, it's just a rough draft. On what subject? Linda said. Scott had the last chicken ball. Macbeth, said Brandon. Quick thinking, and the smart thing to do once he was up in his room would be to study for the Macbeth test and arrange for a make-up. He grabbed an egg roll and turned to go. I loved Macbeth, Linda said. You did. I had a great teacher. He knew the whole play by heart. Brandon thought of Mr. Monson, putting in time till retirement, the Cliff's notes for Macbeth half hidden in the drawer of his desk. Cool, he said, because it kind of was. But not an impossible feat of memory. In one day, this day, he himself had already learned the lyrics of 3 or 4 cuts Unca Death CD, without even trying. What's the theme? Linda said. A theme. Of your essay. Mom had been an English major, loved to read books by the pool when they were on vacation, but Christ, why now? The witches, he said. He had nowhere else to go. What about them? She had that look she got when company came over and some interesting intellectual discussion was about to begin. Shouldn't we be getting down to business here? Scott said, can't you see this is all part of it, said Linda. What's going on, said Brandon. Just tell me what about the witches. I'm interested. Brandon took a guess. How they stir up trouble, he said, an undercurrent of fate moving the whole story. That sounds very promising, Brandon. Thanks. He took one last forkful of Mongolian beef. I'll just sit down a minute, Scott said her. Please, said Linda. This is important. They both looked pale. Brandon got scared, that pale look, the empty bedroom. Is someone sick? Nothing like that, said Linda. Let's all just sit down. They sat at the table, Scott at one end, Linda at the other, Brandon between them, facing the bow window. We had some alarming, disturbing, Linda said, disturbing news today. Scott said, how? How the fuck had that happened? Had the school called and all that shit about Dewey and the essay was just to let him dig in deeper? But the school only started calling when you got to level 2, and Brandon was barely halfway to 1, for Christ's sake. Unless, was it possible that the parking lot monitor had seen them cruise by and later checked to see if they were in class? That fucking Mr. Cranepool, the biggest asshole in the school. Brandon got ready for a scene. We found out your SAT results, Linda said. That's it. 1090. Thank Christ. Brandon let out a big sigh of relief. His mom must have misinterpreted that, had to, since she didn't know the real story. He was in the clear, because she said, and now don't be too upset. About what? Your SAT score. I'm not, Brandon said. Then he remembered hearing somewhere that the scores weren't coming till next week, or maybe next month. It came early or something, he said, just to make a little conversation. There's a number you can call. A number? One of those credit card things, Scott said. It cost money. Only $13, Scott said. They glanced at each other, Mom and Dad. They weren't telling the truth about the $13. Must be something else. You couldn't wait. Brandon said. They could be pretty weird. It's kind of important, Scott said. 1090, putting you in the 75th percentile, Linda said. Brandon shrugged. Not bad, huh? Was that the test where he skipped a whole page of questions by mistake, just a little wrecked from the Friday night keg party in the woods after the Old Mill game, or was he mixing it up with geometry? Months ago, or weeks, anyway, hard to remember. First, Brandon, I want you to understand that your father and I both know you're very bright. Big brain in there, kid, said Scott. The problem is, some very bright kids haven't yet learned the skills that allow them to show how bright they are on these kinds of tests. Yakety fucking yak. Where the hell was this going? And all of a sudden, with that funny way Beer had, he needed to piss. Do you understand the relationship of the SAT to college acceptance? Linda said, is that a trick question? Brandon said, hey, said Scott. This is serious. Colleges make you take it, Brandon said. Right, said Linda. But I meant the numerical relationship. I did a little research today. Guess what the median SAT score for last year's freshman class at Yale was? 3,000. It's out of 1,600, Brandon. 1601. Knock it off, said Scott. Those little pink anger patches that hardly ever appeared on his cheeks were just visible now. 1430, said Linda. She was looking at him with big eyes, like she was trying to hypnotize him or something. Who wants to go to Yale? Brandon said. Linda got up, went out to the garage. Brandon heard her car door open and close. Scott sat back in his chair, kind of like he was on a break. Linda returned with a stack of thick books. College, 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 it said one very one. She leafed through the top book. 12,046 applicants wanted to go to Yale last year. They accepted 18%. Good for them, said Brandon, or take Brown, said Linda. Providence is nice, remember. She found the page. 14,900 applied, 18% accepted. Average verbal 690, average math 690. What's so nice about Providence? Brandon said Federal Hill? The restaurant we went to after that tournament. The food sucked. Damn it, Scott said. He grabbed one of the books, whipped through stabbing schools with his index finger. Amherst, 698 verbal 700 math. Haverford, middle 50% range, verbal 640 to 720, math 630 to 730. Dartmouth, 711, 704. BU for Christ's sake, 630, 632. He looked up at Brandon. Mom was watching from the other side. Crosshairs, what does it say for Yukon? He said. What is that supposed to mean? Said Scott. You both went there. Things were different then, Linda said. How? You guys went to Yukon, you're successful. You're missing the point, Linda said. Nowadays it's vital to get into a top college. Do you know what a difference it makes if you've got Princeton or Stanford or somewhere on your resume? I see it all the time, and as you must realize from just this brief survey, even someplace like BU is going to be a stretch for you if things keep up the way they are. Okay, Brandon said, standing up. I'll do better next time. Great, Brandon, said Linda. What we were hoping you'd say, said Scott. Hey, no problem, said Brandon, rolling up a quick mushu pork to go. Was that all it took? Those were the magic words? I'll do better? You never knew. We'll sign you up for an SAT prep course tomorrow, Linda said. Kaplan or Princeton review? Completely your choice. About what? Brandon, already out of there in his mind and really needing to piss, missed that one. Which course to take? Linda said. I checked the websites. They're both twice a week, one night and Saturday mornings, which shouldn't affect tennis, and of course we'll want to fit in community service at some point, sooner the better, but I'm not taking any fucking SAT course. The pink patches on Scott's face went red. Do you know what would have happened if I'd talked to my old man like that? Brandon rolled his eyes, made him a bit dizzy. He wouldn't do it again. I'm not taking any SAT course. But Brandon, Linda said, haven't you been listening? Forget it. He started walking away. Do you think Sam would act this way? Scott said. Sam? What's that asshole got to do with it? That asshole, said Scott, will probably go to Harvard. He'll still be an asshole, Brandon said, walking out of the kitchen, into the front hall, on the way to a good long piss, his room, an end to all this bullshit. He raised his voice to make sure they'd hear. And no way on that goddamn course. You can't make me, and that's that. The front doorbell rang. Brandon happened to be right there. He opened the door. It was true, they couldn't make him. They could drop him off at Kaplan, Princeton Review, whatever it was, and pick him up, but they couldn't make him listen to one word, make one mark on a sheet of paper, answer a single question. The course wasn't going to happen. End of story. There in the doorway stood Dewey's mom. Are your parents in? She said. Or something like that. Mostly he was just taking in the glare she gave him. Brandon thought fast, but no good ideas came. He tried the best of what they had. I think they're eating dinner right now. Is there something I could, Brandon? Linda called from the kitchen. Who's at the door? It's, Mrs. Brickham. Mrs. Brickham? Dewey's mom. Then Linda was in the front hall too. Everything happening too fast of Mrs. Brickham? Nice to meet you at last. I'm Brandon's mom. Brandon watched his mom taking in the expression on Mrs. Brickham's face. Is a me thing wrong? Yes indeed, said Mrs. Brickham, turning that glare right back on him. Upstairs, Ruby was running into a little problem with a scandal in Bohemia. Holmes was a cocaine user. She knew that. In fact, she was considering bringing it up during discussion period at the next school-wide DARE conference, but she'd been taught that cocaine revved you up, and here was Dr. Watson talking about the drowsiness of the drug and how Holmes had to rise out of his drug-created dreams to get on with the business of solving crimes. Was this another mistake, like the hunting crop and poker mess-up? If so, there was something wrong with Sherlock Holmes, like he didn't quite make sense, fit together, and Ruby didn't want that. She got up and started down the hall to the stairs. In the mirror at the top, she saw that her right side Thumbelina had unraveled, leaving just one horn sticking up on the left. Cool, Ruby went downstairs, taking the last 3 in one jump, landing with both feet inside a black square, heard talking in the kitchen, ran in. Is cocaine an upper or a downer? The talking stopped and everyone turned to her, Mom, Dad, Brandon, and some fierce grey-haired lady she didn't know. Our daughter, Ruby, Mom said. The woman's angry gaze rested on Ruby's single Thumbelina. A scary woman. On Halloween she'd make a perfect Wicked Witch of the West. Ruby herself always went as Princess Di. She had a huge tiara with a heart-shaped ruby, her favorite gem, of course, and she said, trick or treat, with an English accent. How about watching TV for a half hour or so, Angel? Mom said sure, said Ruby, and left the room. Left it with every intention of going downstairs to the home entertainment center, with the big TV, surround sound, DVD, but out in the hall she heard her dad say the car got towed. To the pound, said the fierce woman. Right out from under their drunken noses. That's what led to their undoing. Led to their undoing, right out of Sherlock Holmes. Who could blame Ruby for lingering in the hall? How was that? She heard Dad say the cost was over $300, said the woman, and the pound takes cash only. So Dewey and your son, that your son part sounded very nasty the way she, Dewey's mom, of course, said it, took the credit card into a bank and tried to get a cash advance. The bank called MasterCard and MasterCard called me. I approved the advance without letting on, and they came driving merrily back in Dewey's car, the car that was Dewey's and is now for sale, with some story about working late on Ashan's project. Is this true? Brandon, said Mom.No answer. Brandon, said Dad. A little grunt, more yes than no. Ruby was transfixed. This sounded like Ferris Bueller, one of her favorite movies, but happening for real. Ferris, her own brother. She had a million questions, one of which was, are you going to take that bumper sticker off before you sell the car? If you do, I want it reimburse half. Dad was saying, I'll accept your money, said Dewey's mom, but it's not why I came. I wanted to inform you as to the character of your son, in case you didn't know already. I understand your feelings, Mrs. Brickham, Mom said, but I think that's a little harsh. If you choose to defend his actions, so be it, said Dewey's mom. A care scraped on the kitchen floor, then another. Here's a check, said Dad. Yes. He was a great dad. Footsteps came toward the hall. Ruby lit out for the entertainment center. She found Zippy gnawing on a pool cue and little puddles of something here and there. Dewey's mom left. Brandon got up. Where do you think you're going? Said Scott, taking a fucking piss, Brandon said, or shouted. In the bathroom off the front hall, with those lacy towels that didn't absorb water, Brandon finally had time to think, but his only thought was, Jesus Christ. You can't do the simplest goddamn thing. His parents were assholes. Dewey's mom was an even bigger asshole. The tow truck driver was an asshole. Those holes at the car pound were assholes. Brandon left the bathroom. They were waiting on the other side of the door. I can't even take a piss around here. You realize the discussion about the prep course is over, Linda said. You're taking it, Scott said. Brandon felt much too hot. His clothes were uncomfortable. A zit was about to erupt on the tip of his nose. He could feel its push, like a goddamn volcano. Do whatever you want, he said, went past them, not really pushing, up to his room, slammed the door, lay on his bed. The message light on his phone was blinking. He hit the button. Dewey. This is so fucked, man. Unca Death was in the background. How does that bicycle messenger job sound? Real good. Fuck you good as new. All we do then it's through. Linda checked the time, realized the SAT prep offices might still be open for night sessions. She called Kaplan, then Princeton Review, learned there wasn't an opening in any of their Central Connecticut courses until the next cycle, 2 months away. I can't believe this, she said. Scott opened one of the flashcard boxes. Maybe we could do it ourselves. Do what? Teach him. Scott checked the card. What does lachrymose mean? Weepy. He turned the card over, read the definition. Hey, you're right. He tried another. Perfidious. Traitorous. Scott looked on the back. Wow. The English major. He took another card. Miscreant. Miscreant, Linda said. That's a tough one. Liar, maybe. Scott checked the answer, shook his head. Villain. An English major, Linda thought, but from Yukon. Didn't make any sense at all. She knew that right away, but it was one of those thoughts that coming out of nowhere had the ring of truth. It won't work, Linda said, us teaching him. He won't cooperate. And we're not teachers. Then what? We'll have to find someone, a professional, just till we can get him into one of the courses. Scott opened the yellow pages. What should I look under? Tutor. Lots of them in here, Scott said. One-on-one instruction in your own home, affordable hourly rates. We need to do some research first. I'll talk to people in the morning, Linda said. Make some calls. Me too, said Scott. She glanced at him, about to say, I'll take care of it, but he wasn't looking. Instead, he was cracking open a fortune cookie, reading the message. He passed it to her. Happiness is all around. Scott ate the cookie, crunch crunch, and it was gone. Chapter 5. Julian's phone rang. He was watching a huge flock of starlings, thousands of them, flying nervously back and forth between 2 groves of bare-limbed trees in the distance. At the same time, he was enjoying the first drag from his first cigarette of the day. Smoking was so pleasant, a perfect harmonizing of the physical and mental, even spiritual, but Julian wasn't stupid, understood the health risk, had even at one time encouraged the growth of nicotine-inspired tumors along the spines of white mice in a biology lab, and therefore limited himself to 3 Dunhill Internationals a day, on awakening, after dinner, and a third whenever he wanted it. Usually when he was feeling especially good, but sometimes the exact opposite. Julian half-sucked a smoke ball over his tongue, letting the smoke absorb his moisture, held it, still a ball, at the back of his mouth, breathed in fully, then let the smoke lazily find its curling way out through his nose and mouth. Tantric smoking. Through the blue-tinged plume of his own making he saw the starlings rise as one from the tree crowns of the westernmost grove, wheel toward the east, all banking at the identical angle, about 45 degrees. In their uniformity of movement and solid black coloring was something undeniably fascistic. That thought was pleasant too, intimately associated with the smoke in a way hard to define, although Julian had no doubt he could make the connection crystal clear, given time. Already Heck knew it had something to do with the utter lack of vulgarity in nature. The phone, still ringing, or ringing again. Julian picked it up. A woman, Paulette, Pauline, Paula, something settling in yet, she said. Yes, the woman from the front desk at the office. He recalled 2 shallow horizontal lines, not deep yet, at the base of her neck and a cheap ornament on a chain, gold-plated head of some bland breed of dog, not much else. Julian glanced around his Spartan quarters. Yes, thank you. He was nothing if not polite, had a chance to take in much of the town. Unfortunately not, Julian said. "I'm sure you'll like it," said the woman. "Everyone does. I'm from Indianapolis originally." Was this the woman he'd glimpsed in the glass of the front door as he left, giving him an appraising look from behind, or had it been the other one, her boss, who'd hired him? Julian didn't mention where he was from originally, just watched the starlings on their metronomic flight path. At that moment, the sun shone through a tiny gap in the clouds, making the flock gleam like an armored column. He took another drag, deeper than the first, breathed it noiselessly into the phone. "The reason I'm calling," said Paulette, Paula, "and I know it's late notice, especially on a Saturday, but one of our people called in sick, and I wondered if you could fill in, just for today." It wasn't in his plans. Not that he had plans, he didn't require them. He'd always been good at keeping himself amused. Breakfast, a long walk, perhaps some reading. On the other hand, there was always the issue of an A. His mood, so relaxed, benign, began to shift a little. "Margie said we'd waive our percentage, you could keep the whole fee." "What's involved?" "SAT prep, initial evaluation. You should have all the materials." "They'd be in the green plastic." "I'm sure I do." "Then it's a yes." "It's a yes." The temptation to mimic her was suddenly very strong. Julian mastered it. "Why not? I might as well start somewhere." "You're a doll, Julian." 11 till 1, but these evaluation summitimes go longer, depending on the client. It's in West Mill, 37 Robin Road. He wrote the client's name and the directions on a Moroccan-bound memo pad he carried, using a Mont Blanc fountain pen with dark blue ink, almost black, that came from a shop on Regent Street. Then he opened the green plastic folder to see if there was anything unusual in the manual's approach to bringing the hapless up to speed, at least, what passed for up to speed in this society, in these times. Of course there was not. Inez makes 75% of her free throws in basketball. What is the probability, to the nearest 1/10%, that she will make her first 3 free throws and miss her fourth? The answer, 10.5%, popped up in Julian's mind, literally, white figures on a black mental screen, at once, before he'd even had a chance to scan the multiple choices. There it was, D, 10.5%. A, B, and C, 100%, 75%, 25%, were to catch the idiots, E, 17.5%, to catch all the other catchables. Julian checked the step-by-step teaching guide to the Inez problem, thought of 1 or 2 variants, although none could resemble the actual unconscious method he used, flipped through to the verbal section. Negligent, forsake A, ostentatious, vaunt B, illustrious, succeed C, adamant, conceded, mendacious, deceive E, tenacious, clutch clearly D, transparently so, as if there were an arrow pointing to the letter. He envisioned the tedium of explaining to. He checked his memo pad for the name. Brandon Y, A and E were wrong, hoped he wouldn't have to do the same for B, or heaven help him, C as well. Julian took a last luxuriant drag from his cigarette, then put it out, although an inch or more remained unsmoked. Disgusting to smoke it down to the tiniest, but evidence of the addict, the pig. On the memo pad Hugh wrote, negligent is to forsake us, mendacious is to deceive. There was a poem somewhere in that little couplet. What came next? Hezet bent over the memo pad, thinking. Nothing came. His mood so light-hearted to begin the day, he glanced out, the starlings were gone, darkened some more. He rose and went into his tiny bathroom. The first thing Julian did, without quite knowing why, a whim, really, was to shave off his beard. How full it had grown, like some woodcutter hippie, or rabbi. He felt a little mental lift from that triple-barrel joke. Julian used an Eagle brand straight razor from Thea's LSR, sharpened to a fine edge on a stone he kept in his kit, shearing off the beard in long tessellated swaths of foamy hair that piled up in the sink. His bare face appeared, section by section like jigsaw pieces, a fine face. When there was nothing left of the beard but that strange little tuft under the lower lip, he paused. There was a name for that tuft, some appropriately low name for what really was a gutter affectation, but Julian couldn't bring himself to have it off. He liked that little thing. And on a face as distinguished as his, how could the effect be gross? It would be more like a diacritic from a Nancian tongue, or a single-lettered surname, or one that began with FF. He left it on, a tiny badge of something special. Julian consulted his USGS map. He believed in good maps, always got one first thing on arriving somewhere new. He found the street of the client, Robin Road, measured the distance with dividers, a very long walk, too long given the time, which meant the bicycle. He had no car, had been carless for some time, didn't mind. Flexibility, adaptability, the keys to resilience, and resilience the key to strength. The clouds recovered the sun as he dressed. Julian was watching them thicken and darken, a pleasing sight. He didn't like things too bright, when he sensed another person. He went to the window, looked down. His landlady stood in the yard, looking up. Middle-aged, overweight, dressed on a Saturday in red and black checked flannel jacket, jeans, waterproof boots. She saw him and waved. Also a smile, too big. She had good teeth and knew it, no doubt. Julian waved back, keeping his own smile to himself. She made a little window-opening gesture, up. Julian released the catch, an old-fashioned brass one, the brass all brown, and raised the window. A letter for you, Mr. Sawyer. A letter? How was that possible? Julian glanced quickly beyond her, saw nothing but what she called the big house on the other side of the long lane, and in the distance the two groves of trees, empty of starlings. Nothing unusual, then. He left his little room, the only habitable space in what she called the carriage house, and went down the worn stairs, creak, creak. Cold air rose to meet him even before he opened the outer door. Julian noted it, that was all. He was impervious to the elements. She came toward him, her lipstick the same shade of red as the checks on her jacket. Settling in all right, Mr. Sawyer? He'd already dealt with that question this morning, inane and nosy at the same time. Nicely, thanks, Mrs. Bender. Gale, please, said Mrs. Bender. And I haven't been a real Mrs. since the Reagan administration. Julian, said Julian. He supposed her voice was a good feature too, humorous, even intelligent, but what he wanted was the letter. She reached through the buttons of the red and black jacket, pulled it out, handed it to him, the envelope warm from being in there against her body. Julian took it in an unhurried, unconcerned way, but his eyes found the return address at Tons, A+ Tutorial Center, his employer. His unconcern turned genuine, a very interesting sensation, that change, the make-believe becoming real, quite physical. She was giving him an odd look, head on a slight tilt. Why, you've shaved your beard. How can I deny it? She laughed, and through her laughter gave him a complicated look reflective of several emotions, all receptive. Thanks for bringing the letter, Gale. We'll have to arrange some less disruptive method in the future. She lowered her gaze slightly, down to the little tuft left behind, and locked on it. It's no trouble, she said, missing the point. In the envelope, Julian found a dozen A+ tutorial business cards and a note from Margie, the boss, written in big round letters. So glad to have you on board, Julian. You can ink your name on these for now. We'll have printed ones in a week or two. He put them in his pocket, secured the green plastic folder in the spring-loaded carrier over the rear wheel of his bicycle, not his, but a rather new and sturdy mountain bike he'd found draped in spiderwebs in the cellar of the carriage house, rode up the long lane to Trunk Road and turned right. So pleasant, and the wind was even at his back. Not that it mattered, Hugh was very strong, legs, back, shoulders, without being at all bulky, thick-necked, clumsy. He pedaled through rolling farm country, seeing no one. Then into a suburban landscape, perhaps exurban, since the houses were still far apart, and quite suddenly he was rolling down Main Street in Old Mill 10 minutes earlier than he'd expected. Julian went into a coffee place, had an espresso, studied his map. Had discovered a much shorter route to Robin Road in West Mill, a route that involved cutting through the town forest. No paths were marked on the map, but who ever heard of pathless forests? He ordered a brioche, took out the memo pad, tried again to find the poem. Negligent is to forsake us, mendacious is to deceive. What came next? A poem hid in there, he could feel it, a brilliant poem, the kind that would find its way into the language, be quoted, change the way people thought. But whatever came next didn't come. Julian paid his bill, left the brioche half-eaten. Not very good anyway, not a real brioche, and his authentic pronunciation of the word had confused the serving girl. No tip. A few minutes later, he entered the town forest, the wind dying at once as though someone had cut off the power. The path, of course there was Apeth, with the odd root sticking up, the odd rock, but easy for him, he sped up if anything, led through silent woods. This was a good place, Julian knew so at once, full of shadows and strange perspectives. The word that followed, deceive, began to take shape deep in his mind, just out of reach. He passed a little clearing, heaped here and there with beer cans, and the word receded inexorably, like a falling tide. Julian climbed a long rise, glimpsed a tiny oblong of water in the distance. The blue flicker blinked out the moment he started down, the path now winding. Julian stopped pedaling, just coasted, as silent as the forest around him, the only source of wind he himself. Then water flashed again in his right, many oblongs of it now, the trees concealing them until the last moment. He heard a voice, a child's voice. Don't do that, Zippy. Julian paused by a boulder, the granitic type left by departing glacier peered over the top. Below lay a pond, almost a perfect circle, another glacial remnant. On a strand of frozen mud about 100 feet away stood a girl in a blue jacket with yellow trim. A large mutt was shaking itself off, spraying her with water. Almost a Norman Rockwell scene, but it was much too dark in this forest for Norman Rockwell, and except for the blue and yellow jacket, there was no color at all. Zippy. The girl, she wore a strange hat of some kind, raised her hands ineffectually. From that single gesture, and from her piping voice, Julian could tell how commonplace she was. Now the girl threw a stick into the water. The dog refused to chase it. They both stood there, child and dog, gazing, or gaping perhaps, at the expanding circles the stick had made. How bored they were, girl and dog both, and how boring. It would take a very dark Norman Rockwell to make art of this little non-scene, an upside-down Rockwell, and the result would not be uplifting. Julian titled the imaginary painting Lumpen Child and rode on, silent, through the woods. Trees, the wonderful sensation of having the planet to himself except for the little girl and her dog, of being very big, of bringing the wind. This could go on forever. He'd barely had the thought before the forest journey was over. No trees, the real wind, now in his face, and he was at the edge of someone's backyard. Julian paused. A big, unfenced backyard, with woodpile, swing set, a dozen or more tennis balls lying around like dirty yellow flowers, patio, bird feeder. The feeder was in the form of a cute little house, white with black trim, someone's idea of cozy comfort. A crow stood on the perch outside the tiny door, not feeding, but watching him. Beyond the patio rose the real house, which seemed to have sprung from the same sort of aesthetic, also white with black trim, also cute, also cozy. The only difference was the tall red brick chimney, too tall, really, almost unstable looking, as though agent could topple it with one casual swat. A matching brick walkway led around the side of the house, past a deck, coiled garden hose, trash cans. Julian dismounted, prepared a suitable tale, the woods, a little lost, fill in your own blanks, and walked his bike over the bricks toward the front of house and Robin Road. He heard a toilet flush as he went by, but no need to go all the way to the street, because halfway across the front lawn Julian caught the number on the mailbox, 37. He'd homed in exactly on target, like the kind of missile yet to be perfected. He leaned his bike against a light post beside the front walkway, removed the green plastic A+ tutorial folder from the carrier, approached the front door, the black, solid, with solid brass fittings. Julian took out one of his new business cards, put a solid business-like expression on his face. As he rang the bell, he noticed the welcome mat. It actually said welcome, the word entwined with daisies. Daisies! His mood, not the best since the failure, not failure, how could that word apply, to find the word that came after deceive, lifted. He heard footsteps coming from the other side of the door, felt his solid business-like expression altering slightly, striking an added note or two of amiability. From the tiny house in the backyard came the cawing of the crow. Chapter 6. Linda opened the door. A tall man stood on the threshold. Yes, she said. The man had a friendly smile. Julian Sawyer, he said. From A+ Tutorial. I'm here for Brandon's SAP prep. You are, said Linda. We were expecting someone named Sally. Sick today, I'm afraid. He gave her a business card with a mortarboard logo on the front. The shape of his hand caught her eye, a Michelangelo study come to life. Margie has sent me in her stead. Not a good start, Linda thought. The reason she'd chosen A+ in the first place was this Margie woman's recommendation of Sally's skills with reluctant boys, uncooperative boys, the insanely hostile. Sally was a junior at Trinity, a lacrosse star with 5 brothers. This man was, what? Too old to be a student, even a graduate student. When she thought of tutors, Linda thought of college kids or school moms, not this. He wasn't right for the part, not that he didn't look intelligent, far from it, certainly wouldn't be right in Brandon's eyes. Brandon, at that moment sulking in his bedroom, headphones clamped on tight. I appreciate your coming at the last minute and everything, Linda said. She glanced past him, looking for his car, spotted only a mountain bike leaning against the light post. The problem is that Brandon's not what you'd call enthusiastic about this idea. The sacrilege of it. Sacrilege? Schooling, on a Saturday. Exactly. And Margie thought that since Sally, Scott came up from behind her with a handful of Ruby's blue and yellow feathered arrows. Where's her bow? He said. Then he noticed the substitute tutor, whose name Linda realized she had failed to catch. The first lesson was critical, how to postpone it until Sally was available without being rude to him. This gentleman's from the tutoring place, Linda said. I thought, she's sick. Linda noticed with surprise that the 2 men were about the same height, Scott slightly taller if anything, which meant that the other man wasn't even 6 feet. The problem is, a cry, Ruby's cry, and Zippy shot out from the side walkway, his leash flying free. Not again, said Scott. He dropped one of the arrows. Bending to pick it up, he lost control of them all. At the same moment Ruby appeared, also on the run, her hair in that ridiculous devil-do, her jacket missing. Zippy tore across the street, Ruby following, calling, Zippy, Zippy. Oh, God. Ruby wasn't going to, and she didn't. Didn't stop, didn't look left or right. The burst of fright Linda felt in her chest couldn't have been more powerful if a car had indeed been coming. Ruby. Then Linda was running too. Zippy bounded onto the Strambolous lawn, headed straight to their rosebushes, the glory of Robin Road every summer, now hooded in plastic. Without a pause, like a madman with a plan, Zippy started attacking the plastic. Zippy. Ruby dove for his leash, caught it, tried to drag him away, but couldn't. Zippy yanked the plastic free. Zippy. Linda called. From halfway across the street Zippy seized the rosebush at the base of its stem, started tugging at it in fury, growling and jerking his head from side to side. The Stromboli's front door opened and Mr. Stromboli came out in a purple robe and slippers, a golf club in his hand. He ran too, surprisingly fast for such a fat man, raising the club high. Ruby, now on her feet, saw him coming, screamed in terror, got tangled in the leash, fell. Zippy strained at the rosebush, blind to everything else. Linda shouted something at Mr. Stromboli, she didn't know what, then suddenly the substitute tutor was on the Strombolis lawn, not running, just there. 10 or 15 feet from Zippy, he said, "Heel." Zippy stopped what he was doing at once. His head came up, swiveled. He saw the substitute tutor, trotted over and stood beside him, tail wagging. Everyone else, Linda, Ruby, Mr. Stromboli, froze. It was strangely quiet, like after a jackhammer stops. The substitute tutor helped Ruby to her feet, handed her the leash, then knelt at the rosebush, digging around a little with his hands. Linda could actually hear his fingers in the dirt, repositioning the roots. He replaced the tattered plastic, walked over to Mr. Stromboli, said something Linda didn't catch. Mr. Stromboli replied. The substitute tutor nodded. They shook hands. Mr. Stromboli walked back to his house. Mrs. Stromboli was on her way out, also in a robe, although not carrying a golf club. He spun her around and they both went inside. The tutor turned to Linda. "No harm done," he said. She didn't know what to say. For one thing, she still couldn't come up with his name. Brandon, headphones back on, Uncle Death in his ears, sat at the dining room table, watching the tutor guy grade his evaluation test. "Call me Julian," he'd said, and added some joke about another guy with a weird name, Ishmael or something, a joke Brandon didn't get. Julian, a gay name for sure, but he didn't seem gay, not literally, not whatever the other term was either, when it's just a metaphor or something. He hadn't said much after that, sitting quietly in Dad's chair at the end of the table while Brandon took the test. For a while he'd gazed at some words on a memo pad, pen in hand, although he never wrote anything. Later he'd got up and examined the collage on the wall behind the sideboard, mostly tennis pictures of the kids, none recent, Ruby, Brandon, Adam. After that he'd taken a look at the bottles in the wine rack. That's where he'd been, standing behind Brandon, when he'd said, "Time's up," startling him a little and taking the test booklet away. Uncle Death was something else. And his video was fucking incredible, that girl in the gold shorts and the white old lady wig. He thought about her every night. Fuck you, good as new. All we do then, it's through the job you got, the brains you spew. Why a horn-hopping mama just about. Brandon became aware of the tutor looking at him, lips moving, smoothing the test booklet under his hand. He lowered the headphones, Uncle Death wrapping on tinily around his neck, projecting the results to a full-length test. Julian was saying, "You did a little better in math this time and about the same on the verbal." "Hey!" The tutor guy had one of those soul patches under his lower lip, which was kind of cool. "Interested in your exact scores," he said. He also had a great speaking voice, like an actor, I guess. The tutor guy checked his paperwork. 600 math, 500 verbal, 1100 total score. 600. Didn't sound so bad. What was his name? Julian, but not gay. Brandon waited for him to say, "Not bad," or "Good job," awesome-thing like that. Julian said nothing. He opened his green folder, turned pages, stopped. Brandon read, "Questionnaire upside down." "What colleges are you interested in?" "I don't know." Julian made a check mark in a box. "GPA?" "About 3.2. "Favorite subject?" Brandon shrugged. "Least despised, then." Brandon thought. School was all so fucking boring. He was half asleep just behind his eyes most of the time. Maybe history. Julian wrote it down. Best book read in the past year. Helter Skelter. The only book he'd read in the past year, he'd come across it in Dewey's garage. Helter Skelter? It's about the Manson family killings. Julian looked like he was about to smile but didn't. What did you like about it? Kind of interesting, Brandon said. Julian watched him, as though maybe waiting for more. Brandon couldn't think of anything else, and finally, Julian said, returning to the questionnaire, any career plans? Brandon shook his head. I'll just write, interested in serial killing. So deadpan, Brandon didn't get it right away. Then he did, and started laughing. Now Julian smiled, a little surprise for Sally when she comes for your lesson next week. Brandon laughed again. He switched off his MP3. Julian wrote something on the sheet. You're really writing that? Brandon said, should I? Julian said. Brandon shrugged. Julian slid the folder across the table. In the box beside career plans, Brandon read, indefinite, no need to frighten Sally, Julian said. But I will leave her a note to spend extra time on analogies. Brandon hated them. Not your favorite, said Julian. He shook his head, suck. Yeah. The exact word he had in mind, although it sounded weird coming out of Julian's mouth, almost like Brandon was hearing it for the first time. Julian opened the test booklet. Revenge is to bloodshed, he said. You circled C, as sadness is to death. Wrong. Julian came around the table, sat down, placed the booklet in front of him. A, knife, wound B, rain, corn C, sadness, death D, electricity, light E, mercy, healing. Brandon gazed at the question, his brain now too tired to think, to even absorb the individual meanings of everyday words. Maybe he really was stupid. And who was the asshole who dreamed up that little system of colons? He felt Julian's gaze. Any thoughts? Said Julian. Brandon shook his head. Why don't you try cause and effect? Cause and effect. As a method. For example, revenge leads to bloodshed. Similarly, does knife lead to wound? Yeah. What about a bread knife? While Brandon was thinking about that, Julian said, rain to corn. Kind of, Brandon said. Tip number 1, Julian said. Eliminate all kind ofs. Electricity to light. Sure, Brandon said, but he wasn't feeling sure. Julian reached into his pocket, pulled out a wooden match. Not a box of them, just one. He ignited it with his thumbnail, real easy, not even looking at it, his eyes on Brandon. What was he getting at? That you could have light without electricity? Mercy to healing. Julian said, I guess that's the one, said Brandon. I had it the other way around. The other way around? Julian was looking at him closely. There was something about his eyes, like the chip driving them was the very latest. Brandon nodded. Death causing sadness. Julian said. And bloodshed revenge. Totally screwed up, right? Not at all, Julian said. He blew out the match, looked around for somewhere to put it. But there was nowhere. No one smoked but Brandon weed when he could get it. Julian stuck the burnt match back in his pocket. The high-speed processor behind his eyes switched off. Completely defensible, he said. Your problem is the College Board doesn't include a section for student defenses. Brandon laughed. And therefore? Brandon shrugged. Therefore, Brandon, you have to think like them. Like the College Board. Not so hard. Not hard at all, in fact. Imagine the kind of people who formulate these questions. Are they brilliant? I don't know. Or are they smart? Smart. Smart, not brilliant. Do they listen to the Beatles? Or do they listen to Uncle Death? Brandon was stunned. Uncle Death was practically brand new. And Julian looked too old to know about rap. Although not as old as Mom and Dad, there wasn't a line on his face, his hair was thick, his stomach flat. The light changed, or Julian's head shifted, because suddenly his eyes were like mirrors for a second, opaque and glittering. Brandon realized he'd been staring at Julian, maybe rudely, and looked away. "You must know someone at school," Julian said, "maybe not the most entertaining of your friends, but he usually gets the right answer." "Sam." "Not at his school, at Andover." "But Sam, tip number 2, Julian said. Think like him." "Fuck that then," Julian added, "just for the duration of the test. No one will ever know." Brandon laughed, one of those single-beat laughs, mostly through the nose. Julian was kind of funny. In a sneaky way, Julian checked his watch. "Your ordeal is over." He rose, gathered his materials. "For today." Brandon got up too, rubbed his eyes, tried to recall if he was grounded or whether the SAT prep was the whole punishment for New York. An important question, since there was a keg party by the pond tonight. Through the window, he saw Ruby getting into Mom's car, bow in hand, quiver on her belt. Julian was watching her too. "Your sister's an archer," he said. "I wouldn't say that." Ruby had trouble fitting in the bow, rode off with it sticking out the top off the window. It looked like Mom yelled something at her. It looked like Ruby yelled back. What got her interested in archery? Julian said. "Don't ask me," said Brandon. "She's a bit of a pain, if you want Tokno." Julian turned to him. "How so?" Brandon shrugged. "Did you have a little sister when you were growing up?" The opaque look returned to Julian's eyes. "No," he said. "Dad came in, wearing his knee brace and tennis shorts, pulling on his polo shirt." "All done?" "All done," Julian said, lowering his gaze for a moment to Dad's bare midsection. "Hey, Dad was putting on weight. How'd he do?" Julian turned to Brandon. "Did we make some progress?" Brandon shrugged. Dad came forward with a check, handed it to Julian. "And here's a little extra for filling in." He added a $5 bill, said, "Nice job, Bran," and left the room. Julian gazed at the bill for a moment, like he was reading it carefully. Awesome thing. Then he folded it in half, folded it again, put it in the pocket with the burned match. He held out his hand. "Good luck on the SAT." They shook hands. Julian's felt warm, almost hot. "Tip number 3, he said. "The College Board likes to make nice. So pick the Beatles' answer." "We have made progress," Julian said. Brandon walked Julian to the front door, watched as he got on his bike. Julian pedaled down the driveway, stopped at the street, looked back. "The Beatles of All You Need Is Love," he said. "Not Helter Skelter." Then he rode off down Robin Road. It wasn't much of a bike compared to Brandon's, never used anymore, but Julian went very fast and was soon out of sight. Chapter 7. Saturday had always meant sports: soccer, baseball, softball, volleyball, basketball, figure skating, even, for 5 minutes, hockey. Bino, thank Christ, she was down to 2 tennis, the family sport, for some unlucky reason. A game of running back and forth on a pattern of squares and rectangles, huffing and puffing, calling out the score in a crazy language, getting jolts up and down your arm, arguing, losing over and over to Kyla the lobber. Not to mention Eric, with his blonde tip back hair curling over the collar of his polo shirt, his year-round tan the color of Dad's distressed leather briefcase from Orvis, and those eyes, practically sharing a socket, and archery, which was her own. No huffing and puffing in archery, no lobbing, no disputes. And the word itself, one of her very favorites. Tennis sounded like a disease, but archery, the word, first encountered in a coloring book of myths and legends she'd had as a little girl, on the page with Diana the Huntress, blue tunic, yellow hair, had got her interested in archery the sport. A very cool word, just the sound, and then the double arch, the arc in the bow and the arch in the flight of the arrow. Plus all the other cool words: knock, fletching, cock feather, quiver. Instead of boring ones like in and out, and nasty ones like fault, double fault. Dumbest of all, love meant nothing. Ruby stepped up to the shooting line, took one deep breath, let it out slow, the way Jeanette said. She loved the whole routine, narking the arrow not too snug, the cock feather, hers was yellow, the other two feathers blue, making an L with the bow, then the draw, hand, wrist, forearm, all straight, lined up with the arrow, point resting on her knuckle, string barely touching the tip of her nose, grazing her lips, anchored. The anchor position, she could make a list of the things she liked about just that one part of archery. Point 1. The strength of the bow before she even fired, like a living thing in her hands. Point 2. How her fingertips on the nock united the bow and the arrow, made it all possible. Point 3. Everything so still, the distant sight of the target over the top of the arrow stillest of all. Point 4. The center circle of the target, gold like the pot at the end of the rainbow. Point 5. Best of all, that little kiss goodbye of the string against her lips at the moment of release. Ruby released. Just let go, let the string slip away. That slipping away part was pretty good too. Her arrow flew, the blue and yellow of its tail blending together, blue for the sky, yellow for the sun, which was why they were her colors, not favorite colors, but colors like a knight's. Also good, the flight of the arrow when she'd done all she could, and now whatever happened happened. One New Year's Eve before she was born, when Brandon was 4, Adam had tossed him a tennis ball on the very last second of the old year, and Brandon had caught it on the very first second of the new. The flight of the arrow was something like that. Thwack. Not thwack because Ruby couldn't possibly hear the arrow striking the target 40 yards away, but there her arrow was, in the gold, yes. In the outer, close to the red, but not touching, definitely gold. She gazed at her final 6 of the day, not what you could call grouped, but still, 1 black, 1 blue, 2 red, 2 gold, one of them an inner. You go, Ruby, said Jeanette. Jeanette ran the kids program for the archery club. Once Ruby had actually seen her split an apple from Theman's 70-meter line. The kids walked down the range, pulled their arrows out of the straw targets. Jeanette rolled up behind them in her pickup, hoisted the targets into the back 2 at a time, said, "Hop up." The kids hopped up. She drove the mover to the line of parent cars, waiting by the old practice field at West Mill High, a mom or dad motionless behind every wheel, engines running, heaters on. Ruby got in the Jeep. "You must be freezing," Mom said. Jeanette heard that through the open window of the pickup. "Never too cold for shooting, right, Rubister?" "Right," said Ruby. "Keep 'em sharp," Jeanette said. "You bet," said Ruby, holding her belt quiver between her knees. Jeanette, one more good thing about archery, reached out and closed the door for her with a thump. Mom glanced out at Jeanette, shivered. They drove off as a huge flock of dark birds swooped low over the empty field, then up, like a rising black wave. Ruby knew she could never shoot at a bird or any other living thing, but that didn't stop her wondering if she'd be able to hit one in flight. She practiced doing it in her mind, leading, release, thwack, and feathers drifting down. "My aim is true." "What's that, Ruby?" "Nothing." Good grief, she'd said that aloud. She checked on Mom with a tricky sidelong look. Mom was thinking about something else, no follow-up coming. And the birds were almost out of sight, a tiny cloud now, darker than the rest and moving the other way. Those feathers drifting down weren't funny. She could never shoot a living thing. "Serve 'em up, gentlemen," said Eric in that funny accent of his. Saturday afternoon doubles, the only tennis Scott played now, except for batting it around with Brandon once a month or so. Not Ruby, who had walked off the court the last time he'd hit with her. "If you're going to make the ball bounce that high, you can forget it." The kids could be damned disrespectful, both of them. Brandon probably needed his tail whacked, but no one did that anymore, and Scott doubted he could have in any era. As for Ruby, he was still trying to find the completion to that thought when Tom laid the balls on his racket. "Start us off," he said. Saturday afternoon doubles, Scott and Tom played Eric and whomever Eric brought along. They hit hard for an hour and a half, cracked jokes, maybe worked up a sweat, sat in the steam room, sometimes went out for a bee, losers paying. Today was a little different because first, Scott was planning to nudge Tom a little on the Symptomatica deal. Second, the player Eric had brought along today was Mickey Goodukas. Why? Eric had never invited Goodukas before, and although Scott hadn't actually played him, he'd seen him on the court a few times, enough to know that Goodukas wasn't on their level. Not that they were great. Scott and Tom had both played in college, and Eric had kicked around the satellite circuit and claimed membership on the Swiss Davis Cup team at own time, although Sam had checked their rosters going back 25 years on the internet and failed to find him. That made them pretty good, a long way from great, even back when they'd been at the top of their game, but too much for Mickey Goodukas, probably a 4.5 player at best. That was one problem. The other was bald lefty who foot faults all the time? A real sleazeball? Tom was a stickler for court etiquette. Scott, at the baseline, held up the balls and said, "Play well, gentlemen," hoping Goodukas caught the gentleman part and have fun, added Eric, in the ad court on the opposite side. Half fun, it sounded like. Did a funny thought hide in there somewhere? Goodukas, waiting at the baseline on the due side, said nothing. He looked a little too intense for Saturday afternoon doubles, crouched low, too low, in too tight shorts, the lights glaring on his bald head and sweat beads already gleaming on his mustache and inching toward his backhand, the way players with weak backhands tried to make that big forehand space enticing. Good luck. The old man had put them straight on that one before they'd even had a formal lesson. If there's a weakness, why hit anywhere else? Scott bent a slice wide to Goodukas's backhand. A real nice one, with bite. He was going to have a good day. Nope, said Goodukas, not even twitching. Caught the line. Not just caught it, but landed smack in the middle, as Scott could confirm just from the set of Tom's back at the net, although Tom hadn't moved a muscle. Bad calls were even worse than foot faults. No expression on Eric's face. Of course, he took whatever he could get. Aha bit formed in the boonies of the satellite circuit, if not ingrained. Scott went with his kicker on the second serve, down the middle where Goodukas wanted it. Scott never used the kicker anymore because of his shoulder, and he felt this one right away, that old twinge, deep inside. But even though this match didn't mean anything, he couldn't help being a little pissed. Goodukas swung and missed completely. 15 love, got him Himmel, said Eric. Second serve ace. Perhaps it is better we go right to the showers. Tom came over, bounced him a ball. Their eyes met. What's got him Himmel? Scott said, no idea, said Tom. That showers thing's what scares me. Scott laughed. Tom laughed too. This was fun, not half, but total. Tennis was still in their blood. What had Ruby said? Just like math? Was she going to be one of those people who didn't know how to have fun? Kind of like Linda, maybe, the way Linda was now. Scott pushed all that out of his mind and served to Eric, forehand side. Eric was all over it, pouncing in his bandy-legged way, angling his return right at Scott's feet as he came in. Scott dug down for the ball, popped it up, practically on Goodukas's strings. An easy put away, but Goodukas overhit it, might have been trying to put a hole in Scott, actually, and somehow popped it right back up off the top of his frame. Tom stepped across and smacked it past Goodukas's outstretched backhand in that decisive way he had, quick and sure. 30 love. Goodukas had trouble patting up the ball with his racket. Eric, standing behind him, made a face, like this was going to be a long afternoon. Scott, thinking of Symptomatica, decided to go easier on Goodukas the next serve. Another slice, but not as hard as the first, and to the forehand this time, where he wanted it. Goodukas took a big backswing, a messed-up muscle-bound stroke, beyond fixing, and hammered at the ball. From the way he was set up it should have gone cross-court, but instead it came right at Tom, a screamer. Tom was fooled completely. The ball hit him in the middle of the forehead. For Pitt's sake, said Eric. Gudukas held up his hand to show it wasn't intentional. Scott took a few steps toward his brother. You all right? Tom turned, reached in the pocket of his shorts, bounced him a ball. A 30-15, he said, and that was all. There was a colorless, bloodless circle on his forehead. He didn't even look at Gudukas, just moved to the juice court, took his place at the net. We are all right to play. Eric said. Neither of them, Scott or Tom, replied. Everything, life even, was simple for a moment or two. They were brothers, on the same side, together, and would now wipe the court with Mickey Gudukas. Tom signaled behind his back, closed fist, meaning Eric's forehand again, but this time Tom would poach. Scott tossed the ball in the air, rocked back. A cell phone went off, a loud one. Scott broke off his motion, an awkward halt that hurt his shoulder even more than serving the kicker. Gudukas yelled, time, and struggled with a cell phone stuck in the pocket of his too tight shorts. There were signs in the lobby, the locker rooms, on the double doors to the courts, no cell phones in the building. Add to that Gudukas's foot faults, bad calls, clumsy game, like he'd done research on how to piss Tom off and his real purpose was to kill the symptomatic. A deal good and dead. Gudukas talked on the phone. Scott, Tom and Eric gathered at the net, Eric doing little tricks with his racket, rolling it up and down his arms, Scott doing little tricks with the ball, bouncing it in that back and forth walk the dog style perfected by Boris Becker, Tom standing still, holding his racket across his chest. Gudukas was one of those people who talked loudly on the cell, like farmers on crank-up phones in old movies. Are you fucking kidding me? He said. And I don't fucking believe this. He glanced over at them. They all looked away, except for Tom, who hadn't been watching anyway. How is Sam? Eric said. Good, said Tom. Still likes Andover. Loves it. And the team is good. Tom nodded. They've got one senior took early decision at Stanford and another's getting a full ride at Duke. Stanford is good tennis, Eric said. I know Billy Mixer. Who's he? Said Tom. The coach. Yeah, said Tom. We made the doubles finals in Estrel in '89, Eric said. The kid going to Stanford, he plays number 1 at Andover. Yeah. And Sam? Looks like he'll be number 2 this spring. I could call Billy, perhaps, said Eric. Put in a word. Scott stopped doing the Boris Becker thing. You think Sam could play for Stanford? Tom said. He sounded surprised, and pleasantly, Eric considered. While he was considering, Gudukas yelled, what a stupid asshole. Eric blinked. Sam's mentality is good, he said. I'll call Billy. Thanks, Tom said. Was that how big things got done? Scott thought. So easy. Hey, guys, Gudukas called, coming over. Some shit's come up, can't wait. Just when it was shaping up to be a good match, we'll have to do it again. Thanks for the invite, Eric. See you, Scott. Nice meeting you, Tommy. Tommy. No one called him that, or ever had. When he'd gone, Scott said, we could play a little Canadian. Eric waved the idea away. You boys play. I've got a million rackets toastering. Scott and Tom looked at each other. I don't know, Tom said. Yeah, said Scott, let's just bag it. Tom started toward the bench where they'd left their sweats, racket covers, water. Scott lowered his voice a little. What about Brandon? He said. Big things, so easy. And Brandon, said Eric, not lowering his, and tennis, Scott said. Eric considered. He must work on his consistency, of course. But it'll look for him to maybe move up this year, help us out from time to time. I didn't mean at West Mill. I meant in the future, at college. College, said Eric. Like a lot of good tennis players, his eyes were a little too close together. Now the gap seemed to narrow some more. Like Stanford or Duke. There was something humiliating about the way he said those two words, Stanford and Duke. D3 then, said Scott, his voice sounding sharp, but that might have been the acoustics indoors. Middlebury, say, or Tufts. Middlebury, said Eric. Tufts. He licked his lips. What is happening now, Scott, is even D3 level is getting tough. Scott glanced over at Tom. He was taking off his elbow brace, didn't appear to be listening, but who knows, said Eric, giving Scott an encouraging pat on the back. Why don't you boys hit? Court time's on the house. Tom turned. Yeah, he said. His eyes met Scott's again. It had to happen sometime. Hell, Scott said. Why not? A quick set, said Tom. Scott shrugged. What did that mean? Quick for who? Unity, wiping the court with Mickey Goodookers, slipping away fast, and gone serve em up, Tom said. The bloodless circle on his forehead was turning red. Half fun, said Eric. They hadn't played each other in years. Scott was the better player, higher ranked with the New England USTA in the days they were both ranked, had had a better college career, dominating several players who had dominated. Tom was bigger, stronger, faster, with a much harder serve. Booth never beaten Tom, not as little boys, not as teenagers, not as young men. Scott had been 21 the last time, summer of his senior year at UConn, and Tom 23, working for the old man. They'd played on slow red clay courts, now gone, below the 17th tee at the Old Mill CC, all by themselves in the middle of a day too hot for anyone else. Tom, 7-6, 6-7, 7-6, 13-11. The closest Scott had ever come, closer than that was almost impossible. He'd blown 9 match points, and there'd been some yelling after it was over, even shoving, almost a fight. Even at that age, Scott stuck 2 balls in his pocket, held up the third. Tom waited on the other side, a foot or 2 inside the baseline, which was annoying, not all crouched and intense like Goodookers, but relaxed. Quick for who? Scott thought of saying something like, half fun, but the idea was quickly shoved aside by the memory of that 9th blown match point, Amory unvisited for a decade or more. Scott could see it clear, a sure down-the-line winner that had caught the very top of the net and instead off dropping over, like Tom's previous 2 shots, 2 fell back. Pure bad luck, Scott thought as he tossed the ball in the air. Bad luck, fate, Stanford, Duke, it was going to be now, the cracking through. Big things, so easy. Hugh went with the kicker, right off.